Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. We're very excited about today's conversations. I see many familiar faces from across the UN system, from civil society, from member states. We're very glad to have you all here. Thank you so much. My name is Katrina Leclerc. I'm the program director at the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders, GNWP, a long-term partner to many of you and many of us here in the room. We're very grateful for this collaboration with the Permanent Mission of Austria, the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Korea, and the Permanent Mission of Sierra Leone. We're very excited to have all of you with us. Of course, also with the partnership with the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict, GPPAC, long-term partners of GNWPs, the UN Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, DPPA, and of course, UN Women. So thank you for joining us. We're very excited to be at the event Investing in Women's Leadership, Women's Participation in Recovery and Reconstruction Efforts. Folks, the room is full, but we have hundreds more online, so we're very, very excited about this conversation and to hear from our esteemed panelists. So now, without further ado, I will pass the floor over to our opening remarks. Mr. Stefan Pretterhofer, apologies for any mispronunciation, Deputy Head of Mission of the Permanent Mission of Austria to the UN and a longtime partner. Over to you for opening remarks, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, dear Katrina. Perfect pronunciation of my name. Good afternoon to everyone and a warm welcome to all here in the room, but also those colleagues that join us online. It's really impressive turnout and shows the interest and relevance of this topic. So very, very pleased to be here with all of you. And I'd really like to very warmly welcome you to this side event, which, as it was already mentioned, focuses on women's leadership and women's crucial role in recovery and reconstruction efforts. So my country is honored to co-sponsor this event alongside our partners from GNWP, a long-standing partner, and the permanent missions of Sierra Leone and South Korea. So I'm very happy that my colleagues are here as well. The GPPAC, the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict, DPPA, and UN Women. I would also like to ask our distinguished speakers who have joined us today, coming all the way from Uganda, Georgia, Myanmar, and Ukraine. Today's discussion is an opportunity to share best practices on ways to ensure the active participation of women in recovery and reconstruction, both during and in the aftermath of conflicts. And as you all know, women have always taken on substantial roles in all stages of conflicts, although their contributions have not always been adequately recognized. Their perspectives and experiences are still too often overlooked and brushed aside. But in reality, the active participation of women in all parts of social, economic, and political life provides an invaluable contribution in conflict-affected and post-conflict countries. I'm thinking of Ukraine as a case in point. Rwanda is another good example, and so is our co-host country, Sierra Leone. But we cannot stop at mere participation. We need to actively promote and empower women as leaders in all parts of society, including both the civil society and political spheres. And we can especially do so by ensuring support to women's organizations and women peacebuilders, women politicians, and women entrepreneurs. And as donors and supporters of UN Women, WPHF, and GNWP, we are glad to see that many valuable efforts are being made in this regard. Whether it is prevention, response, or recovery, women leaders contribute on all levels of their societies, but especially in their communities, so that the local ownership is of special importance. Women are active leaders at the forefront of building peace and a stable environment for all of us, and they must not be reduced to merely standing behind men. The triple nexus of humanitarian, development, and peace work is particularly important in this regard, and effective cooperation is required in these overlapping areas, and it's important to ensure that these efforts are gender responsive. To investigate the effects of women-led initiatives, GNWP has conducted a very interesting study by examining various cases from all over the world. I understand some of the results will be shared with us and presented today. So I'm very much looking forward to learning more about that and to the presentation we will get later on. I would also assure you and reassure you that Austria remains dedicated to advocating for gender-responsive and conflict-sensitive humanitarian action, crisis recovery and reconstruction. We have done and will continue doing so also in this very important process, which is now the Summit of the Future, where member states are negotiating at the moment and will be still very engaged on having a good action-oriented outcome document in the next few weeks and months, and hopefully we'll be able to endorse a very forward-looking document then by our heads of state and government then in September. Before I conclude, I would like to thank GNWP for their huge efforts and valuable work towards increasing women's participation and ultimately achieving a more peaceful world. And as I said, please count on Austria's continued support and collaboration. I would like to thank all of you for your attention, and I look forward to hearing from all of the panelists and then the discussion we'll have afterwards. Thank you.
We can applaud.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for kicking us off. Now I'd like to turn over the floor to His Excellency Amara Sowa, the Ambassador and Deputy Permanent Representative of the Permanent Mission of Sierra Leone to the UN. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, friends and colleagues, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us at this panel, Investing in Women's Leadership, Women's Participation in Recovery and Reconstruction Efforts, that the Permanent Mission of Sierra Leone is proud to co-sponsor with the Permanent Mission of Austria and the Republic of Korea, the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders, the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict, UN Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, and UN Women. The topic of today's event, participation in recovery and reconstruction efforts, is not only timely, but essential. We witness increasing and intensifying conflicts in different parts of the world, and at the same time, we are aware that there are many long-running and unresolved conflicts. This is because women are not given the opportunity and necessary support to be meaningfully involved in conflict resolution and are frequently sidelined in recovery and reconstruction processes. Consequently, recovery and reconstruction do not have a gender perspective and prevent us from achieving inclusive and sustainable peace. The biggest challenge for countries emerging from violent conflicts is rebuilding their political, social, and economic institutions. Economic recovery presents its unique challenges due to severe damage to infrastructure, a weakened workforce, food insecurity, and various forms of economic inequalities. Therefore, a human security approach in post-conflict recovery that centers women's leadership and participation and intentionally integrates care for women and everyone affected by violent conflicts is a must. I'm proud to share that one of the key provisions of Sierra Leone's Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Act 2022, or the GWE Act, is economic empowerment. Most time, emphasis has just been placed on the, appointive and elective positions threshold that seem to center the act. But for us, the most important element is women's empowerment within that act. It had a section on equal pay for women, equal training and education opportunities, and women's access to financial support. The GWE Act is currently being mainstreamed across the country using a localization strategy. The project is one of our latest partnerships with GNWP under the guidance of our Ministry of Gender and Children's Affairs and with the strong participation of Sierra Leone civil society. Women's economic security, particularly access to resources and decision-making on peace building, post-conflict and crisis response planning, and economic recovery is also a priority issue for the Compact on Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action, where Sierra Leone is a board member. The Permanent Mission of Sierra Leone commends the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders and all its research partners for conducting research on women's participation in economic recovery post-conflict and reconstruction in conflict-affected and post-conflict countries. We are also grateful to UN Women for supporting this critical initiative. Sierra Leone remains steadfast in its commitment to ensure women's integral role in recovery and reconstruction efforts, particularly in economic recovery. We look forward to action-oriented recommendations that recognize and support women as planners, decision makers, and implementers in all areas and levels of reconstruction and recovery efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and thank you for outlining some of the collaborations we've been doing together in Sierra Leone. We're very grateful for the continued collaboration. Now I'd like to pass over the floor to a dear friend and colleague, Ms. Sarah Hendricks, the Director of Policy Program and Intergovernmental Division at UN Women, for opening remarks.
Thank you so much, and really it is an honor to be here today. Excellencies and colleagues, dear friends, women peacebuilders around the table, and all, very good afternoon to you. Somehow we are on day 9 of the Commission on the Status of Women, and we have a full room here to talk about such an important topic. This is very heartening. I'm really honored to join the dear ambassadors to welcome you to this event where we will unveil new research on women's participation in economic recovery and reconstruction in conflict-affected countries. And allow me to add my voice of thanks and recognition to the global network of women peacebuilders for leading this research, and to the Permanent Missions of Austria and Sierra Leone, as well as South Korea, alongside GPPAC for co-hosting this discussion. This work is so closely and integrally linked to both the priority and the review themes for this year's Commission on the Status of Women. Just as women bear the brunt of the impacts of crisis and conflict, they are also much more likely to live in poverty. In fact, our data tells us that women in conflict and crisis are 7.7% more likely to be living in poverty. They are less likely to have access to financing and to financial inclusion. I do want to say, with a note of optimism, that the WPS agenda has made such important and, I think, impressive strides over the last many years, especially at the national level. We have gone from 19 countries in 2010 with a national action plan on women, peace, and security to, and I hope you're guessing right now how many, to 108 today. This indeed is a reason for celebration. At the same time that we celebrate this tremendous growth in national action plans on WPS, our commitment to the WPS agenda can also be demonstrated through where we put our money. And this is where we must accelerate. Here, allow me to share 3 sobering statistics, and I hope that you'll remember them. One statistic will be about 26%, the other on 5%, and the other on 150 million. So I'll unpack those 3 numbers. First, UN Women's research into the funding of national action plans on women's peace and security has shown that only 26% of NAPs actually had a budget, a correlative budget, when they were launched. And that this is one of the reasons, if not the main reason, for the underperformance of these instruments that advocates often point to. Second, 5%. Only 5% of total bilateral aid in conflict-affected countries is currently allocated to gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls during reconstruction efforts. This obviously needs to be enhanced. And the third number, I hope you remember it, it was 150. If we take all bilateral aid supporting feminist, women-led, women's rights organizations and movements in conflict-affected countries, we get to no more than $150 million for the last year for which we actually have data. By comparison, it is $2 trillion that were devoted last year to military spending. This discrepancy is massive and unjust. The world is investing more in weapons to start and to sustain wars that too often are begun by men, than in the women and girls who are working to end them and to rebuild. And the results are clear. The conflict and violence only compounds. Colleagues and excellencies, dear peace advocates around the table, lessons from the implementation of the WPS agenda really show that while women are the backbone in their communities in terms of the economy during crisis and conflicts, they are too often excluded from large-scale decision-making when it comes to recovery, when it comes to reconstruction, when it comes to budget distribution. The significant lack of support and acknowledgement for women peace builders who are so central to this, who play such a crucial role in rebuilding conflict-ridden societies, often, if I may say, at great personal risk, often at great personal cost, often with so much courage. It is these women who we see can be attributed to the lack of data that showcases their impact, the lack of research, the lack of attention. So let us shift that narrative. Today, with the unveiling of this research showcasing women's impact in countries like Nigeria, Colombia, Iraq, Myanmar, we can join the tide of voices working to shift this narrative. We must, I think, amplify these voices of women peace builders and advocate for the necessary support, really put our pressure, whether it is in the roles that you have to be decision makers, or the roles you might have as investors, or the role you might have as a voter. Whatever it is, we can advocate for the necessary support and resources that women peace builders require to sustain their essential work. I hold a lot of optimism and confidence that the insights and discussions shared today, that the unveiling of this research will inspire us all to redouble our efforts, to really support women peace builders in post-conflict settings, to fund them, and to champion their rights and their agency. I look forward to the discussion, and with this, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing some of these reflections and important numbers that we hear sometimes but often forget. And now, without further ado, the last but not the least for our opening lineup, we have Ms. Roslyn Akombe, the Chief of Peacebuilding Strategy and Partnerships at the Peacebuilding Support Office of the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Katrina. It's really difficult to speak after Sarah because I think she has said it all. She has given us all the numbers, so I really don't have much to say. But because I still love the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs and I want my job, I love my job, let me deliver what they asked me to say. And if I didn't say that, Shaza, who's sitting at the back there, will not be very happy. So let me just go by what Shaza asked me to say today. But first, I just want to express a deep appreciation, obviously, to the global network of women peace builders, and we commend you for the work that you continue to do. Really great to see you, my friend. We spent quite a number of years working on the budget, so it's appropriate that you and I would be here talking about something related to recovery, given that we spent a lot of time working on the UN budgets in the other room, and so we really appreciate Austria's leadership on these, as well as Sierra Leone. I mean, who can speak more about reconstruction and recovery apart from Sierra Leone? So really thank you for that, and of course the Republic of Korea. And of course UN Women, our long-standing partners on these issues. You know, the fact that you are all still here, as Sarah said, at day 9 of the CSW, and the intergenerational, because I was looking around and seeing dinosaurs like myself, I'm sorry to call you dinosaurs, dinosaurs like myself, but also young peace builders around the table gives me hope that this is an agenda that will continue being pursued, and that the voices that you bring here are voices that you will continue to bring to the table because they are absolutely necessary. So allow me to maybe just highlight 4 areas and which I see, or we see, as opportunities that you as actors, whether you're member states or whether you're civil society, could be able to get involved, or how you can get engaged in helping us move forward on recovery and construction efforts in favor of women, and to build on some of the research work that has already been done that will be presented today. I mean, first, let me emphasize the critical role of the intergovernmental processes, and you have a voice as peace builders within the Peace Building Commission, and how to strategically use the Peace Building Commission to be able to bring the voices, to be able to push for focus on women and also on recovery. I had the good fortune this week to participate in the exchanges that you women who are working as peace builders had with the Peace Building Commission. It was really great to hear the points that the civil society representatives kept talking about in terms of gender-sensitive recovery and reconstruction efforts, and really emphasizing the importance of engaging women as designers, implementers, but also as, in all the budgetary processes. Those voices are important. I know I had a conversation with a few women who've come to several meetings of the Commission on the Status of Women this early this week, and they kept saying, we come and it's the same issues because we keep saying that representation is important. We keep saying these things, and why we not heard. And my response to them was like, please don't give up, keep coming, keep making the noise, because at least they know that the women are coming to town during the CSW. And so we all behave and try to make sure that we incorporate you in our work, and we are focusing on you during this period. So don't give up. If you feel like you've done this several times, don't give up. It actually makes a difference, because we feel the pressure. I can tell you as an international civil servant, I do feel the pressure of being able to say, okay, the women are going to be coming again, so what do we need to show? And that brings me to the second point, where we have been using the Secretary General's Peace Building Fund in a very strategic way, very deliberate way, because the Peace Building Fund is really the only dedicated fund that we have within the United Nations that focuses on peace building, but that also takes a specific measure to ensure that women are included in those processes. In 2023, again, going to numbers, we're very happy to say that we went beyond our internal target allocation for support to gender equality and women's empowerment. So instead of the 30% of the Beijing Platform for Action, we got to 47%. And I mean, we had no choice. My Assistant Secretary General is Elizabeth Speha. Our deputy is our double, and I am Rosalina Kombe. So it does make a difference to have women in leadership positions. It does make a difference to have women in decision-making positions. And we can see that, the fact that you have UN Women keeping us honest with our numbers, and Shaza always there, but also the fact that our leadership of the Peace Building Support Office, our leadership of the Department of Political and Peace Building Affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, is women-led. It makes a difference to have women around the table. And lastly, on UNIFIs, we believe that given, when you look at the large pot of money that is available for peace building or development in general, large part of that is with international financial institutions. And if we don't target that, if we don't work around with the World Bank, with the African Development Bank, with the Asian Development Bank, then we will only be targeting a very small amount of money, and which, you know, Sarah has given us the statistics, 150 million. There's much more available when you're thinking about what is invested by the World Bank, what is invested by the international financial institutions. So please do use us, reach out to us, to open doors and look for opportunities of engaging with these international financial institutions to put the pressure where it's required, but also to also sometimes sensitize them on what it is to do gender sensitive programming and budgeting for purposes of ensuring that women are included. I thank you again very much and look very much forward to listening to the presentations from Uganda, Georgia, Myanmar, and Ukraine, but also on the report. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and we will take you up on the offer of following up and using this partnership in order to advance our mutual agenda. Folks, before we turn it over to one of our colleagues to present the findings of this research you've been hearing about, I'd like to thank and recognize Dr. Issata Mahwa, who is the Minister of Gender and Children's Affairs of Sierra Leone, who is now joining us in lieu of the ambassador. The ambassador had to step out to join another meeting from the Security Council, and so thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for joining us. Now, colleagues, I'm going to introduce one of my colleagues, Sophia Farian, the Program Coordinator for Eastern Europe, South Caucasus, and Central Asia at the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders, who is delivering these findings and these recommendations of a 2-year-long study that was conducted in partnership with UN Women and Dr. Jacqui True. So over to you, Sophia.
Thank you so much, Katrina. As was already stated, my name is Sophia Farian, and I am very pleased to share with you, on behalf of GNWP, the key findings of this research that was conducted by Dr. Jacqui True in collaboration with UN Women and GNWP. Women's participation in economic recovery and governance is often overlooked in peace and security discussions. However, their economic and political participation are inseparable. Economic empowerment leads to increased agency, fostering political engagement and leadership. This paper focuses on women's role and participation in economic recovery and reconstruction in post-conflict settings in 2 parts: women's contributions on the macroeconomic level and in post-conflict economic governance, with 4 case studies to illustrate these key findings. So I will share with you this research, first setting the stage with the 4 case studies, then the key findings, and finally the recommendations of this research. So the case studies. First, just as conflicts affect women differently based on their unique contexts, these unique factors also influence the various ways in which that women contribute to economic recovery. And so these 4 case studies conducted by GNWP were selected to ensure geographic diversity while providing an intersectional lens to capture women's diverse roles and responses. So our local civil society researchers highlighted women's economic roles in Colombia, Iraq, Myanmar, and Nigeria through either a survey of a variety of initiatives in the country or by diving into one specific case. And this was done through a qualitative research approach and with interviews with women across sectors, ages, and other identifying groups. So, our first case study in Colombia on women-led conservation efforts, community economic governance. It focuses on the Shellfish Picker Women's Community Association of Malaga Bay in Buenaventura, where amidst post-economic recovery and reconstruction, women established a fund to manage the harvesting of the pianguaf shellfish, the main source of livelihood for thousands of community members, and they're predominantly picked by women. The women also took on the environmental monitoring of the mangrove system where the shellfish live. So despite facing challenges such as the exploitation of mangrove forests and drug trafficking, women have shown remarkable resilience and leadership in economic governance and peace-building processes in Colombia. The second case study is in Iraq, on women's resilience overcoming unrecognized care work. This case study exposes Iraqi women's resilience and resourcefulness, especially during COVID-19, through their leadership roles and frontline initiatives. One such initiative is from the women's organization Jude, which established a small sewing factory producing COVID protective equipment like masks and employed 30 women from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and other economically marginalized identities. The third case study, in Myanmar, the ongoing conflicts that have recently intensified after the coup in 2021 create a challenging environment for women's economic leadership in formal political structures. Unfortunately, many civil society initiatives providing vocational training and other economic support did not survive the recent coup. However, diaspora civil society in Thailand has been galvanized to support women working on the ground and advocate against the disproportionate impact the coup has on women economically and otherwise. And our final case study is empowering women through digital finance in Nigeria. It highlights that while women's contributions to household incomes serve as the bedrock for building inclusive and peaceful societies in post-conflict economic recovery contexts, financial discriminatory practices and lack of access to information hamper women's access to foundational economic opportunities. Successful efforts to combat this in Nigeria harness digital technology, and several government and financial institutions have initiatives that reach unbanked, low-income, and self-employed women. Despite these gains, there is still more work to do. Now that we kind of have some examples to grasp, we're going to move to the key findings, of which there are three main ones. Women are largely absent from decision-making on economic recovery, and those initiatives that aim to empower women often see them as beneficiaries rather than decision-makers. And this further complicates the ability to explore this in post-conflict settings, as there are no quotas or targets specifically for women in post-conflict economic governance. There remains a persistent emphasis on funding women as a percentage of a group, which, even if achieved, is not the same as gender inclusion. And we cannot overemphasize the lasting negative impact that COVID-19 had on economic recovery and reconstruction efforts and on the economic lives of women. This research identifies enabling and inhibiting factors for women's meaningful participation in economic recovery and economic governance. Enabling factors. The acknowledgement of women and young women's leadership at the grassroots level and their comparative advantage in rapid and effective response to the unique needs and priorities of their communities. Second, improved women's digital infrastructure and digital literacy with a focus on enhancing financial literacy, digital communication skills, and navigational abilities. Women's entrepreneurship and how it can foster social cohesion through the networks they create of women producers and traders. And finally, support from UN Women and national and international NGOs for women-led initiatives to promote women's participation in economic recovery. That wasn't a plant, that was there. Now, inhibiting factors. And there are a lot, so I'll kind of go through them quite quickly. Lack of long-term, predictable, and sustainable funding for women-led initiatives. Poor working conditions, including low wages, lack of social security coverage, and the unrecognition of care work. Lack of transparency and access to resources, especially for marginalized women. Lack of comprehensive integration of people with disabilities in economic recovery efforts. lack of reporting and data on beneficiaries of financial initiatives, discriminatory and gender-blind financial practices, and lack of governance support for economic recovery. And finally, the recommendations. So these 7 that you see are categories under which there are several sub-recommendations that we hope you can dive into once this research is fully published later on. The first, ensure women's inclusion in decision-making processes through formal and informal mechanisms. Second, create gender-responsive policies for post-conflict economic recovery. Third, create economic opportunities across various macroeconomic sectors and capacity enhancement for women and young women in these fields. Fourth, improve social care infrastructure. Fifth, improve access to financial services. Sixth, enhance the digital inclusion and access for women. And finally, expand knowledge production and data collection on women's leadership in economic recovery. Thank you for the opportunity to share these case studies, the key findings and recommendations on women's inclusion in post-conflict recovery and reconstruction, and we look forward to sharing the full report with you in some time in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sophia, for jumping in on this and sharing some of these findings, enabling and disabling factors. Now I'd like to turn it over to our civil society colleagues who have traveled from quite far to be with us here today. Some of you extended your trips, some of you came only for this, and we're very grateful for each of you. I'll start with Rubina. Rubina Rubimbois is the founder and executive director of the Coalition for Action 1325 in Uganda. And Rubina, we'd love to hear from you some reflections in the Eastern African context, mostly in the Ugandan context, about this question of economic recovery and reconstruction and the impact or enabling factors for women's participation in there. So over to you, Rubina. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Katrina and GNWP and co-sponsors of this event. I'm excited that the majority of participants here are women peace builders. Good afternoon. The journey begins during the conflict situation. That is my experience in Uganda, that women's participation in the economy thrives during a conflict situation. It's kind of ironical, but that's the truth. In Uganda, during the 20-year civil war, where over 3 million people lived in IDP camps, whenever we visited, you would find women had set up small businesses around their little huts. They were selling cassava. They were selling cooked groundnuts. They were selling bananas. They would go to the wilderness and pick leaves that can be eaten and dry them and sell them. On the contrary, their intimate partners would be seated around a pot of beer. And it is the women that made this beer and made money out of them. So as a result of this effort during the armed conflict, over 20 years, women developed incredible skills. They became entrepreneurs. They learned to take decisions. They learned to negotiate. And when organizations like mine that would go and visit them, and we would engage them and talk to them and listen to their issues, it built their capacities even further. So that after the conflict ended, and I go to the next stage, now the conflict has ended and they have gone back home. But these women have learned to work together. They have learned to network. They have learned to associate in informal processes and structures. When they go back home from IDPs, from foreign countries, they return with those new skills. They return with that new knowledge, and they only build on that. On the other hand, their intimate partners that were used to gathering together over a pot of beer during those distressful times become despondent. They become despondent when they return home because they no longer have the pot of beer and their friends around them. And they become depressed. And then these women that have learned a new skill continue to use the same skills to expand their small businesses. They continue to associate. They register their associations that started during those difficult years. They begin to lead community-based organizations. They begin to lead associations of small traders. They begin to bank money in those small institutions. They begin to learn to use the telephone and mobile services. So they begin to grow. But the inhibiting factor at that level is lack of capital, because the little money they make is the same money on which they must feed the family. It is the same money if you come from a country like Uganda. It is the same amount of money that will enable you take your kids to school, take your kids to hospital if they need health care. So they are hindered by capital. And so that immediate post-conflict recovery, the women are working. There is no woman who doesn't work. They get up at 3 a.m. In Uganda, at 3 a.m., they are already in the market, any market. They are selling this, they are buying that, they are moving around, they are on trucks, they are on buses, they are on foot, they are on the motorcycle. So you can never accuse a woman of not being hardworking, of being lazy. So during post-conflict recovery, what these women need is the support of formal institutions, even the support to register their organizations, the capacity to build this little community-based organization into a civil society organization. They are to increase their skills to do advocacy work and speak for themselves. And the big one is the support to address sexual violence in post-conflict situations, because that is always on their door knocking. And unfortunately, when countries have immediately emerged from conflict, nobody pays attention to sexual violence in a post-conflict situation. Nobody pays attention to skilling women. The emphasis and the budget that is available is for building new structures. And the structures are important. The roads are important. Hospitals are important. Schools are important. But there can be no economic recovery without taking a look at the individual, the human being. And this is where we need women. We need the support for women. The other thing that we forget is that post-conflict recovery comes with new opportunities, you know. But while we are rebuilding these creatures, we forget that war creates a new set of needs that didn't exist before. And this is where the role of women, it's where actually what impedes women's small businesses from growing even higher. There is a destruction of the healthcare system. No one talks about the impact of the destruction of a healthcare system on women. So we talk about their participation in economic recovery. But if their little child is sick, where do they take the child? You think they will go to their small businesses? I want you to appreciate the fact that there is a lot of integration between the different social services and women's participation in economic recovery. Same thing as, you know, families are dealing with the loss of loved ones. They are dealing with the loss of a home. They are dealing with permanent injuries. They are dealing with trauma, you know, like permanent injuries. You have a lot of widows and child-headed household in any post-conflict situation. And we are talking about economic recovery. These are the same individuals that we must focus on. So even as we think of financial institutions, let's also focus on the recovery of the individual women. Women in Uganda, the experience was that a lot of them had been the subject of gang rape. And they came from IDP camps with fistula. If you do not address this woman's need, provide the surgery that she needs, how do you expect her to participate? I'm calling for a more balanced focus in funds allocations to meet the needs, including bodily needs, of women in post-conflict situations to enable them participate effectively in economic recovery. The other point I wanted to make, she's saying 30 seconds. She's saying 30 seconds. Yeah, but I want to talk about the need to integrate conflict prevention in economic recovery efforts. Because if you do not integrate conflict prevention, the country can easily slide back to war. We must take a look at the causes of conflicts. Uganda now is on the edge of a cliff because we did not take into account the root causes of the original conflicts. And involving women in these consultations, designing programs, implementing programs, reviewing our national action plans. We are implementing our third national action plan. And UN Women, thank you for supporting that. And it is costed. But then, it's one of that small percentage. But then, if we are not integrating women's leadership in conflict prevention and in peace-building work, and we are not providing consistent, substantial, and flexible funding to women peace builders and peace-building organizations, the gains that we make in economic recovery are likely to go down the drain once again. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Robina, and as usual, such a powerful, powerful speech and some important remarks and focusing on the human-centric response of economic recovery to enable participation. Now I'd like to turn the floor over on the other side of the room to our colleague Eleni Rusetskaya, who is the chairperson of the board at the Women's Information Center, WIC, in Georgia, another one of our wonderful GNWP partners. Over to you, Eleni.
Good afternoon, everyone, peace builders, feminists, and diplomatic corpus donors, and our partners. It's very important for me to be here together with my colleagues, my organization representatives, and see so much people, a lot of people who really want to peace and women peace, the VPS issue, involving VPS issue. I represent a country, Georgia. You know, the Georgia territory occupied, 20% of territory occupied by Russia. And despite of this, the conflict and war is not active, the situation not easy because we have many IDP and conflict-affected population, and especially Ukrainian war influence of IDP and conflict-affected population in Georgia and renewed the trauma when they has many years ago. And because we work so much for women and peace and security issue, and we start many years ago, our organization worked 23 years, and we was first organization who advocacy adoption the UN National Action Plan, 3025 National Action Plan in Georgia. And in this process was very important for us because we involved in this process more 100 concrete person IDP and conflict affected population. And first action plan reflects the needs, real needs, IDP and conflict affected population. And this process was supported UN Women. Now we have already fourth action plan. Of course, this is very important. The previous action plan not allocated budget, and we criticize it this process. But now we have budget. But despite of this, for us, it's more important of implementation national action plan than create the policy paper, because. And for us, it's very important to participate in this process, IDP and conflict-affected population. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to involve. Despite of this, we involved and we provide inclusion of IDP and conflict-affected population. We work with very poor population. We work with ABL zone where live the women. These women think every day about how to provide their family food, how to provide water, and how sometimes they have no access to internet, not access to mobile phone even. They think about how to provide access to kindergartens, their children, and provide their children to education. And in this, during this phone, it's very difficult to involve the involved women and start to work and involved in the peace building process. Other problem, my colleague already mentioned sexual violence, yes, but domestic violence, it's also a very big problem, because if the women have this problem inside, it's very difficult to start work and to be a leader in this community. Our role to make the more pushing and make women's voice more strong and provide grassroots women's participation in this process and provide their voice in the agenda, in the policy papers. The situation is bad sometimes because we have, I already mentioned, the population is poor in grassroots, and its migration, it's very high, as especially it's concerned the young generation. And young generation and youth, for us, it's very important involved in this process and create the network and to create the generation dialogue and share. It's my colleagues in Georgia and also in here has very big experience with the peace buildings, but unfortunately, youth generation interest to here career, yes, and they go to the abroad, and someone go to the from village in the capital, and they think about their future, and it's very difficult to provide in the peace building process. And when we work, it's very. First of all, thank you very much, all of donors and our partners, because every dollar is important for our work. But despite of this, when we work, for example, VPS issue, only talk about women's peace and security and women's participation in negotiation process in different platforms is not enough for strengthening women as a leader. It's very important to talk about violence against women, for example, they support them to create small business and make their women independent, and provide when we talk about our organization, when we talk about women empowerment, and we talk about women's participation, meaningful participation in the political participation and economical participation, because if you have no money, it's very difficult to talk about, yes, but when women start talk, if some years ago she cannot talk about the problem, women's rights issue and her problem, and when we make a woman strong and she start to talk about the problem, the society and community trust her, and she became the leader. And we have an example when the grassroots women became the member of local government representatives or became the political party leaders. And I think the donor roles, it's very important, but I think it's very important to country context, yes, but in our country, and I'm sure in your country maybe have the same problem, anti-gender rhetoric, it's very high. And how to work about women's rights issues, about gender equality when we have anti-gender rhetoric, and it's very important. The women who live in the grassroots level cannot talk free about women's rights and gender issues because she's afraid. Because here, I don't know, son and husband work in the civil servants, yes? It's depend of government structure. And our recommendation to donor to make balance sometimes, because many organizations, I understand many organizations have mandate to support government structure, but it's very important to support civil society organization and make balance between government support and civil society organization. I personally and my colleagues who work so much in women's rights issue, we have experience to work many presidents, many vice speaker of parliaments, many premier ministers, that our organization exists, yes? And it's very important to help us, and we provide more sustainable peace. And I want to finally say about our organization slogan, women can, women act, women change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eleni. Now we'd like to turn over to a colleague who's coming in virtually. So we have Thinzar Shunle Yi, the Advocacy Coordinator at Action Committee for Democracy Development, and the founder and executive committee member of Sisters to Sisters in Myanmar. Because of the time zone, Shunle has pre-recorded her intervention. So let's listen to what she has to share with us.
Thank you for inviting sisters to this panel. The women from different diverse community, including ethnic minorities and farmers, workers, and even Rohingya women, they knew too well of the scale of their military perpetrations or targeting women and the consequences of military attempt to rule in the nation. That's why they were the first group of people who came out on the street and protesting against the military attempt to rule the nation. So to be honest, in this panel, I would like to address the fact that the United Nations has failed the people of Myanmar, and we all have failed the people of Myanmar because the military keep killing people, bombing people, arresting, torturing. And recently in Dry Zone, in where my hometown in Dry Zone in Mongyua in Sakai, they have set a blaze of 400 houses, adding to the existing 80,000 houses that they have burned down over the past 3 years. So, and they also have banned 4 people alive in this whole village. So the women are running for their life, and they are protecting their own kids and their community, as well as now with the enactment of the conscription law by the junta. The mothers are now suffering because they have to send their kids to the better zone where they have to fight for the military general, the criminals, and also they have to die for them. And at the same time, if they don't send their kids to the better grounds of the military, then they will be punished. The families will be punished because of this conscription law. Many mothers are now crying. Many women are now suffering. And the whole country is in chaos right now. Many young people are leaving. And that is also causing many young women to be the victims of the human trafficker. And the women, they said the junta has said in the law that they say, we're not conscripting women for now, and they say we're not conscripting married women. That has pushed many young women to marry anyone, and then family and also parents are now trying to force their kids to marry because of the conscription law. And at the same time, the military is now conscripting women. To be honest, it is they don't really obey their own law. They are not the ones that will just follow their own laws. There are so many extrajudicial practices in place in different area on ground, and they are conscripting women. We have been receiving different reports from the ground that the women are being conscripted at the same time, and they are targeting around 5,000 men and women will be conscripted. Every man, that will lead to like around 50,000 will be trained, and then they will be sent to better zone to fight against the different resistant forces and ethnic resistant forces, and as well as they will be used as a human shield. Based on the pattern that they have used in the past, they have been using women and men as a human shield so that they can survive as a military. So in this age, the military is crumbling. Military itself, they are losing many manpower, and all they have is just weapons and fighter jets. supported from the countries like Russia, China, India, Thailand, and Singapore. So all these countries keep importing weapons and jet fuels to these military, so the military kept booming. So when we talk about conflict prevention, I think it's really important that we also address the root causes of all these problems. So in a country like Myanmar, the root cause of the problem is the military itself. The military not keeping their own promises, sabotaging their own constitution, and betraying their own people, killing their own citizens, and torturing their own taxpayer. I think it's the main root cause of the problem. So without addressing the main root cause, we're not going into the effectiveness of the conflict prevention, all our money and energy investing in this work. So I think it's important that United Nations agency, including UN Women in Myanmar, and all the INGOs and NGOs working for Myanmar to address the main perpetrator as a perpetrator. And we need to hold the perpetrator accountable. Without justice and accountability, Myanmar will no longer be peaceful. Myanmar will no longer be safe for the women and girls and our generations. So justice and accountability is our biggest demand from the generations and from the revolutions. Without holding the perpetrator accountable, without addressing them that what they have done is wrong, and without telling them what they have done is impacting not just to Myanmar, but also to the conflict to the regional stability and to the global crime, to the global stability as well. Without addressing that, we're not doing any effective works. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you to Shunli for sharing some of these difficult, challenging experiences and continuing crisis happening in Myanmar. Now, colleagues, to close out our panel, we have Olga Zayarna. I think I've got it. The project coordinator at Identifying Feminist Approaches to Reconstruction and Recovery for a Just and Inclusive Peace in Ukraine, and also a GPPAC partner. Over to you, Olga.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And yes, my name is Olga Zayarna. I'm also member of GPPAC network in Eastern Europe, and also I'm peace builder from Ukraine. And I'm a little bit nervous because this is my first time speech in UN in real. That's why, sorry, I'm a little bit, yeah. And what I would like to share with you, this is funding from our research. As you know, in the end of the February marked the second anniversary of the Russian full-scale war in Ukraine. The war that started back in 2014 and has already brought destruction, violence, suffering for our population. Yet coming from the harsh reality of the ongoing war, Ukrainian women remained optimistic when looking into the future, and even through the end of the war, or even a peace process is not yet immediate sign, where the Ukrainian deem it important to start the conversation about a post-war reconstruction and recovery of Ukraine. It's crucial to make sure that it's the logic, the needs of vulnerable groups and diverse context within Ukraine are taken into account, and Ukrainian women activists and feminists have available and participatory spaces to contribute to it. This is why the group of women activists within the project Identifying Feministic Approach to the Reconstruction and Recovery for Just and Inclusive Peace in Ukraine, implemented by the Ukrainian Public Organization Center for Social and Labor Research, with the financial support of Women, Peace and Humanitarian Fund, have conducted a series of discussions among Ukrainian women looking at the post-war reconstruction. Today, I would like to share the result of this conversation, exchange experience, and share key attention points and needs of the Ukrainian feminist activists and peace builders, and concrete ideas on how to fulfill them. And I also invite you to think together about how governments, NGOs, and international agencies can support our survival in times of war and even move beyond survival to feminist recovery. I would like to start to mention that the process of recovery and reconstruction in Ukraine has a multi-disseminated nature. Its scale and complexity lead to different understanding by different social groups within in terms requires a broader discussion and taking an inclusive approach, sensitive to different aspects and various of needs. Through beyond taking into account the gender-specific aspect, is important to include in decision-making displaced women in all their differences. The reconstruction and recovery of Ukraine infrastructure should take into account the interest of marginalized groups, barrier-free and architectural accessibility for people with disability should be a principle of reconstruction of Ukraine, because we have a lot of people who are suffering right now and a lot of people with disabilities, especially veterans, women veterans. The state needs to create a high-quality social housing system, including the reconstruction of assessing housing stock to meet the needs of the IDPs. When looking at the post-war reconstruction through the prism of social reconstruction and care, we would like to pay attention to the two topics: overcoming women poverty and ensuring better social infrastructure that we see of particular importance in the current Ukrainian context, and this directly related to the priority of this CSW session. To overcome women poverty is crucial to improve women's working conditions, support their employment, business activities, and lifelong learning. Moreover, access to information, childcare, social housing, and psychological support play an important and crucial role. For development of social infrastructure is the key to take adaptive and flexible approach, engage local communities, and constantly review the needs according to the dynamically changes of situation of war. We, as a group of women who participated in this discussion, would like to recommend to the donor community to further conduct the support research and informational exchange of the needs of communities in regards to these topics and way to fulfill them, to unite into coalition in order to achieve efficiency of aid, to provide more targeted support of the local CSO and ensure local ownership, and support broader societal dialogue, creation of the coalition, and mechanisms of cooperation between NGO as well as NGO and decision makers at the different levels, local, national, and international. In the post-war period, Ukrainian society is expecting a great demand of the justice. Civil society supports programs should take this demand into account also. Current demands on the state actors include localization by increasing civil society access to international funding, partnerships, and capacity building for local actors. Localization, how you all know, and also my colleagues said, is the key issue to protect the rights of women and girls on the grassroots level. In this regards, we are interested in the experience exchange on how the reconstruction and recovery was approached in the different contexts and how inclusivity was achieved in the process, especially in the way in which women and feminist activists from the conflict-affected communities in all their differences were contributed to the decision-making process. I would like to appeal to international community, including donors, to support further discussion for better understanding and unification of all the approaches to reconstruction and recovery within Ukrainian society and outside of our country. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Olha, and no need to be stressed, even if it was your first in-person intervention. You did fantastic. Now, colleagues, I'm going to turn the floor over to Ms. Yelena Piacomea, an adjunct professor and former deputy permanent representative of Andorra to the UN, for some reflections from our panelists and what we've heard here today.
First of all, I would like to thank all the organizers for giving me the opportunity to share a few reflections to kick off the discussion. As a former deputy permanent representative at a time where we were less than 20 and having had positions of leadership in male-dominated areas, I could only be honored to be here today and to hear some benchmarks in supporting and advancing women's leadership in recovery and reconstruction efforts. Also, Rosaline from GPPAC has given us a very concrete example about the positive effect of women's leadership on budgeting for gender equality. As stipulated by the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, and in particular Security Council Resolution 2122, gender equality is a sine qua non condition to lasting peace and, of course, sustainable development. The resolution emphasizes all the more that economic empowerment of women is an important contribution to the stabilization of post-conflict societies. Indeed, at the core of the WPS agenda is the concern to balance gender power dynamics to guarantee equal opportunities, access to resources, access to justice, and equal participation of women in all areas of decision-making processes. It is the recognition of women as actors of change, as well as the respect and promotion of their rights, that makes the Women, Peace and Security Agenda a transformative tool for promoting the status of women and gender equality. In other words, as Sophia mentioned, considering women as agents, decision-making agents. Today's panelists have showcased good practices to learn from and to replicate, including the effective implementation of national action plans. What came clear today is that investing in gender equality, including bridging the accountability gap for sexual and gender-based violence, pays off. Robina, Elene, Zinzar, and Olga have shared key initiatives that demonstrate the multiplier effect of having women at the decision-making table and at the forefront of the implementation of recovery and reconstruction efforts. I will not go over the 7 good recommendations that Sophia has already presented. I would like to cluster them in 3 areas to kick off the discussion. First, investing in formal and informal mechanisms that ensure women's meaningful participation in the economic recovery of these countries. 2, enabling a multiplier effect by supporting and creating social, financial, and economic opportunities and infrastructures for women, particularly for young women. And last, creating and investing in data collection on women's leadership and women's network. Thank you, and back to you, Katrina.
Merci. Merci beaucoup, Yelena. Unfortunately, colleagues, because we are running short on time, we won't be able to have conversations about this further, but we encourage you to continue this conversation online, and all of you will get a copy of the findings as soon as they are published. Now, to close off our event today, I'd like to welcome His Excellency Sang-Jin Kim, the Ambassador and Deputy Permanent Representative of the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Korea to the United Nations. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for being with us. Over to you for your closing remarks.
Thank you. I think you guys already exhausted so much energy, so let me be very brief, but at the same time, let me be frank and personal, because, being a male diplomat, joining this sort of women-related session is somewhat challenging to me, very frankly speaking, because every time before I come to this sort of the session, I ask myself, am I qualified? Do I deserve to be here in this sort of the sessions, understanding, and have the correct knowledge of how the women's are faced within so many multiple challenges. In that sense, just being here and learn it and getting a better understanding. It's so much meaningful to me, very frankly, with you, being a male diplomat. That's number one. And number two, South Korea just became a member of the Security Council. And most of the sessions I attended, listened. And many times, the briefers came. Sometimes, civil society, women briefers came too, and talk about, the situation, Myanmar, Ukraine, Sudan, Afghanistan, Haiti, Gaza, everywhere. It's so much surprising that, most of the victims are the women and the children, if you look at the Gaza casualties. So we engage in discussions every day that vividly portray how conflicts disproportionately impact women, from targeted sexual violence to humanitarian crises, including malnutrition, famine, inadequate medical and hygiene facilities, and the absence of dignity kits. These are not mere the words, but the stark reality endured by women, as I said. So this is where we are, how to describe the situation. And number three, let me personally provide with you the experiences I had and being a Korean and learn from my mother how Korea became the successful story. I think Korea's political democratization and economic success are done by, most of the part are done by the women. That's what I learned from my mother. And the Colombian cases. A couple of months ago, being a member of a secret council, I had a chance to visit Colombia. I'm telling you these stories because I became so much convinced and optimistic about the women's role, because this is, I witnessed very vividly in Colombia. In that visit, I had opportunity to witness firsthand how women were actively participating in various levels and sectors. I met with the Colombian first women Afro-Colombian vice president, eloquently delivering and no reluctance at all. And I was so much convinced and became a big fan of her. And secondly, I met municipal women officials, local community leaders, and the young and victims representative. Most of them are women. They told me they didn't identify themselves as mere victims, but they identified themselves as survivors and political agents to bring about lasting peace, who particularly highlighted the need for greater involvement of women in policy decision-making to effectively implement the peace agreements. This is not simply a description or a rhetoric. I witnessed, I'm convinced, I saw it. I was so much encouraged by the Colombian women's power. So having seen it, I became more optimistic. And as I said, the Korean cases, the Korea had to have the fight, Korean War in 1950 to 53. This is really devastating consequences in Korea. Everybody believed Korea became the poorest country and no hope. But allow me to say, we are so much proud being Korean. You see how Korea is doing so far. In K-drama, K-food, everywhere. Korea is popular. If you say no, fine. But I just say yes. So my mom told me, after the Korean War, women joined the labor force, taking up jobs in factories, agriculture, and various industries that spurred economic revival. Additionally, the women played vital roles in education and healthcare, nurturing the nation's human capital, and providing social service to the vulnerable. And beyond economic endeavors, Korean women also engaged in political activism based on their rights to vote. That was already stipulated in the National Constitution in 1948. Can you believe it? Korea was decolonized in 1945. And Korea was established in 1948. And just immediately after the establishment of Korea, the constitutions give and stipulated suffrages to women. This paved the way for Korean women to participate in advocacy for various social causes, including women's rights, labor rights, and peace initiatives. So today, my conclusion, I learned a lot. I wouldn't say simply, I encourage you, or I will be with you, that sort of things. No. Let me simply say, let me keep enlightening myself to be on board with you and to understand better what women are doing. And secondly, because we are the member of the Security Council, let me reassure you, Korea remain fully committed to the WPS issues. And then personally, I will do my best part to satisfy or meet what you have just eloquently delivered to us in this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ambassador. We are very excited and happy to have a friend in you in the Security Council, a friend to the Women, Peace, and Security agenda, among many others. Thank you, colleagues, for joining us, Your Excellencies, Minister, colleagues from the UN agency, civil society, from across the UN system and the global international community. Thank you so much. On behalf of the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders, our co-hosts, we're very grateful for this conversation. And as we've said, it does not stop here. You will hear more from us. You will never stop hearing from us. Thank you. Thank you so much.